Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Today we're talking about The Dead Don't Hurt, an indie western written and directed by Viggo Mortenson, who also stars in the film and composed the score. It had a theatrical run earlier this summer and is now available for streaming. My guest is costume designer Anne Dixon. Anne, welcome to Below the Line.
Thank you so much for having me, Skid. This is fabulous.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're here. This is going to be a fun film to talk about. A warning for listeners, though, today's conversation will contain spoilers. So go see the film. But before we get into the film itself, Anne, talk about how you got involved with this production from the start.
I got started with the Dead Don't Hurt, which is actually a gem project. It's like a dream project that any costume designer would want. I've worked with Viggo in the past. I did his first film, Falling. So once he got the funding for this and he tried, we were working on it for nearly a year, I guess, before, and just doing some research and so forth, because independent filming is hard to do and to get all the pieces of the pie. So, which in a way was a blessing, so that I could really delve like completely into all the different areas of the film. I've worked previously with Carol Spears, and we have a real symbiotic flow of ideas and so forth. And she's a production designer on the film.
And had she also worked with Viggo before?
She did also Falling, but also she's done just about all of David Cronenberg's films, I think, except one of them. So there's quite a few in that roster. And of course, Viggo's done quite a few of David's films. And that's how he met Carol. And then once his first film came about, then he thought for sure right away about Carol. And then Carol said, okay, well, what about Anne as costume designer? So that's kind of how I got into the loop with Viggo. And then it was, it went so well with Falling. Then we just all jumped the same team, same creative team on The Dead Don't Hurt.
Now, when the budget came together, tell me a little bit about what sort of production time frame you had.
Being an independent film, it's really difficult to get all the financing in place and the pieces of the pie. So I did on my own a lot of research in previously at the beginning, and then I went to Spain to go and do a preliminary pull of costumes. It's a co-production with Canada and Mexico, England, Denmark. So I guess it's more than a co-production, but a few people involved, but it was mainly Canada and Mexico. And we shot most of it in Mexico and prepped most of it there. So anyways, Mexico City doesn't have any huge costume rental houses that have period costumes, because the whole film is set in the 1860s and a part of it in the 1830s. So at the very beginning, I have a previous relationship with Paris Costumes in Madrid. So I went over there and my assistant and we pulled like crazy without even knowing what kind of background numbers we had and how many we would do this, because locations hadn't been found yet, or all the technical parts weren't even figured out. But I had the script and kind of could think, okay, we'll probably have these types and so forth. So we just pulled and pulled and pulled. And then we went to Mexico City and we prepped there for about 6 weeks, I would say, with a crew there and building some of our leads. Then I had a crew in Durango, which is where we moved afterwards, which is at the bottom of the Sierra Madre, and a team was working there. I had a team in Ontario in Canada, because we shot a few days there. And then I had another team in British Columbia, which is the western part of Canada, to shoot some of that stuff there, and then coordinating with Spain at the same time. So A few time zones and lots of Zooms. Thank God for Zoom. And I have to say it was a first to try and do like even dyeing fabrics and not seeing it. It was like through Zoom and it's okay. Can you put it closer to the camera? I can't see it. It's like, oh, okay. I think it's a good color. Yeah, I'll go for that. Those were some of the challenges, apart from a few others, but
Yeah, because of that time frame on shooting, only doing a couple of days, all of this prep and organization had to be going on at once. That sounds like you're in one place where something's
yeah.
happening, but at the same time across the continent, there's going to be these other shooting very soon on top of that.
Exactly. Or, or I'd get like Paris made a whole variety of dresses for us specifically to and which was amazing. And then we had our background all of a sudden started coming in and being cast, and it was like, oh, we don't have enough sizes and certain things. So there'd be these SOS calls, in the middle of the night for them. And it's like, okay, you need to ship us these, or we need to have these. And they were fantastic. So they were saviors.
Well, tell me more about your relationship with the house in Spain, because it does seem certainly there are costume houses closer that might have had these materials, but was it your relationship or was there something about the way this was priced out or the fact that it had was a big European co-production?
One is a past relationship, and they make it extremely easy for a designer to work with them. But the other is also to, again, being an independent film, the tax credits and the spending had to be in certain countries. And Paris has a pied-à-terre in Mexico, so we could then do the financing through Mexican accounts, even though I was going into Spain, but they would ship it there, and then I would gather it from their office, their satellite office in Mexico City, and then it would become Mexican expenditures, which instead of going to LA would have been a lot easier and a lot, time frame and everything, same more or less time zone. But those were some of the reasons why that happened.
Yeah, I'm aware that it can be difficult to stitch together funding for these independent projects. And again, even with Vigo as central and being the draw, this is not a regular Western, and in some ways was probably challenging for folks to understand what they were getting into.
Um, the thing is that financiers usually, want to do some superheroes or some very action-driven type films, but this is more of it's a Western, but it's predominantly from the female side of view of it, from Vivian's point of view. And it's a love story at the same time, and it's about two foreigners in a country. I think Vigo's always very poetic. And I think it comes through in the film. So it's not the exact straightforward type of Western, but there are definitely some elements in there. And there's a couple of good shootouts and chases, but there's also a lot more other depths to it as well.
Talk to me more about some of the specific challenges of filming. And again, you've established that we've got a low budget, we've got limited resources, a lot of shoots going on, but just in accomplishing this kind of film at this scale, what else was difficult?
I think what is absolutely spectacular in the film, some of it is the scenery. I mean, the locations that we went to are breathtaking. I mean, in some ways, what was interesting is that we started our first day of shoot was actually in Ontario during the fall with the colors and in the maple trees and so forth. And we really got a good taste of and some visuals that were stunning. Then we flew across the country and we went over to BC by the ocean. And then we shot the end of the film actually. So we actually knew visually and textually what we wanted. And then we went back to Mexico, and then we were at the bottom of the Sierra Madre. So, and then we shot the rest of it to kind of echo it. But these breathtaking places, of course, you have to hike to it. You have to go by horses. We had these dune buggies that were like amazing in Mexiquilo. And I thought, where the heck are we going? You know what I mean? Because I hadn't seen the locations because I was busy prepping. So we get there and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is gorgeous. But ate so much dust just getting there. It was like unbelievable. And it helped with the breakdown of the costume. So there was a good side to it, but to get the stuff to it there was a little challenging.
Well, horses I know are very difficult to work with, and honestly, I'm surprised that a low budget film can really invest in horses because this is a lot behind the scenes in getting horses on set.
Yes, but I mean, there's no Western without a horse. I mean, there's no
Also, to your
way.
point.
And I mean, the beauty of it is that in the madness of filmmaking, first of all, horses really ground you, and they're such amazing animals, and they really are calming as well. And it makes for a set that will be very calm and no surprises because you can't, once you spook a horse, then that's it. It won't do it again. So we had, whether the horses were on set or not, it was kind of a good start of the mood and the tempo for everything. But mind you, Vigo is that way. He prepares, he's an incredibly prepared man, and it's a very calm set, and there's no madness, the usual madness that can happen. I mean, yeah, there's a little hustle behind, but it's not uh there's no yelling, there's none of that because again with horses you can't. So you have to be very zen. And then we had the beauty of having Rex Peterson, who was our horse wrangler, master guru of horses. And thanks to him, he was able to guide us all and the actors as well, and to respecting the horses and making sure that we got the shots that we needed and we got what we wanted. And I think we did. And I mean, to the point that how much Vigo respects, first of all, Rex. Rex came out of semi-retirement to come and help us with this and help Vigo predominantly, and that was why. But also, Vigo actually names every single horse in the credits at the end.
He names all the horses and he names all the background. I noticed as well. It suggests that he has a lot of respect for all the, even the smallest elements, how this comes together.
Absolutely. The art form of filmmaking, he highly respects it, and the whole language of it. And there's no abuse. There's real love for it and a real passion for it. And I think I mean, it comes through in how he handles everything and everyone. And it, like you said, like he credits every background because without a background, you don't have anything. You can have your actors, but it's kind of like a painting. You know what I mean? Like you have to have the depth of it. You have to have some background or some action or some movement there to make it interesting, whatever the dialogue or whatever the scene might be. So, and he fully understands that and is grateful and very respectful to it.
Now, sometimes as costume designer, I know on a larger budget project, you might not spend that much time on set because, again, as we talked about, you have every other aspect of the film or the project to prep. But it sounds like you were closer to the action on this, and maybe that's a consequence of being the lower budget. Is that a fair assumption that you again were more of the set days in the filming and such than normal?
Most probably, yes. I have an incredible assistant designer, Anna Del Farra, so very grateful, and we've worked together for many, many years. So she knows my affinities and so forth. So she would often be doing some of the overseeing the fittings of the background, and the principal, of course, I would do, but I would then go to set to establish. But I always go to set to establish, just to make sure the pulse is happening and everything is happening. But on this, we had some difficult scenes and some tricky situations and so forth. And my crew at times might not have been the most highly experienced. So I think it was important to be there as well to help them, as well as to make sure, Vigo got what he wanted. And I like to be there as well, just because I find it just eases everything. So yeah, and then I mean, going to um, when we shot in Ontario, of course, I had to be I came over to do that and to oversee my crew that was there. The same with the with BC, and while everything else was continuously being prepped in Mexico, Anna was taking care of that. And then once I arrived, you know, calmed down a few fires and fueled a few others, and we kept going.
Now, are there any specific days or scenes that still stick in your mind as particularly challenging?
I mean, I think the days with all the cowboys, I mean, it's always, I mean, whose heart isn't all, into a Western and doing cowboys? I mean, that was fun. But, you have the element of not just all the gear that's on them, but for them to be on the horses as well. So that was and then we lined them all up, making sure that they were okay. The other I would say is probably when we did the port in San Francisco, where we were down by the seafront. And we had to recreate that. And then there were so many different, it was quite a busy, busy port. And so we had stevedores, seamen, we had sailors, we had vendors, we had fishmongers, we had passerbys, we had upscale people, we had uh, Chinatown was just beside it, so we had that milling about. So that we had a lot of people, and it was incredibly hot that day, of course. So to make sure that everyone was, flowing and it looked right and it happened, and to get to that day was tricky, and then on the day itself, but I just love it. So it's all fun in the end, really.
Let's turn a closer eye on the costume design itself. And are there specific elements that, while again, the entire story comes across, are there things that you'd want to draw people's attention to, say on a second viewing, or things they should watch for that they might miss the first time through?
I think that the wonderful thing about Vigo is that he's very much into real, well, at least in the past two films, very much into realism and honesty. And I think that was so important for him that it came across the board in every aspect, visually, acting wise, and so forth. And so for me, in costumes, even though it's a big, it's a period piece, it's a 1860s, and then some in the 1830s. It's during the Civil War time with those massive bell dresses, and they can kind of look like, those wedding things on the cake, you know what I mean? And then we didn't want that. We didn't want it, even though it was a period piece, we didn't want it to be a period costume piece, and we wanted the story. It was about the story. So visually, I just toned it down and took some artistic license. And even the dresses in the high society in the 18s in San Francisco, the hoops, we made them a little bit smaller, just again to visually, it's there, the width, but it's not overtaking. And also in the decorations of it, and the hats and so forth. And then the other thing that's really interesting with Vigo, there's an awful lot of beats that are continuous. If you look, it's kind of like Find Waldo. There's a lot of those little pieces that come back again and again, the thread of a sub story of a sub story. And for instance, we start with the 1830s when Vivian is a young girl, and you're in upstate New York. You're near the French border of Quebec, and her father is a French Canadian, and he has a ceinture fléchée, which is a woven long belt that the First Nations first had, and then the Coureurs de Bois took it over for the usefulness and everything else. But and so for me, it was, and for Vigo as well, it was really, really important that we had a real authentic one. And I had an artisan from Quebec, Jean-Maurice Côté, actually weave them for us, hand weave them for us. And that thread is a big thread within the story of the whole film, because she then takes it and brings it to San Francisco, and then there's different beats that you see through the film. And at the very end, when she's buried, she actually it's buried with her as well. And so that's like one of the beats that follows that's kind of interesting. And for me, being originally French Canadian, it was really important that I nail it and I do honor to my heritage a little bit. So it was a nice little like hats off to it. So I was very happy with that. The other is there's even subtext, like he goes fishing, he's a fisherman, and then when she meets Olgan in San Francisco port, he's actually eating salmon and fish, and she's buying fish, and then there's fish again in another storyline. And then at the very end of the film, again, it's that, you know, the beginning was the fish, and at the very end, when there's this incredible scene, and they turn around, and there's a young Sislaw girl with a salmon, and she's just offering a fresh salmon to them. And again, like for the Sislaw girl to again get that realism and that honesty, she's in a cedar bark skirt that they would have had. And one of the things that I love about film business is the 6 degrees of separation, or the you never know what you're doing and how it will infiltrate, and how it will kind of be part of your lexicon down the road. And so I took a course a couple of years ago in cedar bark hats, to weave them, from Shy Waters in BC. And she's a master in cedar hat weavings. And then when this came about and I had to have, you know, handmade cedar bark skirt, and I'm thinking, oh my God, where am I going to go? And I thought, I know, Shy, you know, so got to Shy, and then she made it for us, you know, graciously. And so I think all of those elements that are really real in this film, that I think gives even more depth to the sub stories. And then there's kind of like to try and get into the characters, do you know what I mean? And I thought, okay, so Olsen is like a carpenter, and then it's like, what am I gonna, you know, how can I give him a little something that makes it interesting? And I thought, you know, like what would be the Carhartt type of carpenter jacket that they would have had then, you know? And I thought, okay, there's none. It's like, well, all right, well, let's do one ourselves, you know? And so got a canvas and got a shape that's kind of period and kind of interesting. And so he wears it at time, again, to kind of get a little more depth, and underneath some of his over frock coat and sack coats. And then Vivian also wears it at times. So it's just all those little elements, I think, makes it for being a real honest film.
Well, it's nice to see films like this get made. And folks, if you did miss Venture's theatrical run, supporting this kind of independent theater is how we get more of it. So excited to see what Viggo does next. I'm hoping that the experience didn't turn him off of directing something in the future.
He's got a number of stories. He's definitely a storyteller. He's got a lot of scripts that he's written. He's a complete Renaissance man. So I cannot wait for his next one of whichever one will get made, but it should be interesting.
We'll take what we can get. On that note, we're going to call it a wrap. Great having you here, Anne.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure.
Listeners, I always appreciate your feedback. You'll find my contact info on our website, blowtheline1word.biz. That's B-I-Z. You'll also find past episodes and link to all our social media, so check it out. So, Anne, where else can people see your work, and what's next for you?
I have my website that you can see some past work, and with an E-Dixon.com. Also, what's coming next up is actually David Cronenberg's next film, The Shrouds. We opened at the Cannes Film Festival about a month ago, and it will be opening up at TIFF in September, and then it will be in cinemas end of September. I'm not sure exactly the date, but it will be then going into the cinemas. So, very different genre.
Well, another interesting filmmaker. That'll be something to watch for. My closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music, John Wan for our logo, and to all of our listeners, I appreciate you. The Below the Line logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. Please rate us wherever you get your podcasts and tell your friends. Thanks again from Below the Line.